Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a Glacial Geek review video. I'm going to go with a review video, even though this is going to be a slightly different one. I'm not just going to be reading through the book. I'm going to be giving you my takes on the brand new edition of Kill Team. GW was very gracious enough to send me some preview copies so I could take a look over it and give you guys some information about the upcoming release of this new system that I think, honestly, is going to be super good. I'm very excited about it. I've gotten to get in a game with it and looking over the rules and seeing what's going on. I think there's some very interesting stuff that they've got going on here. This is a big step away from what it had been previously. So if you were looking for just an update on what it was, then you might be a little disappointed. But honestly, it's something that's completely new. Will take some getting used to, but it seems very interesting, and I think has a lot of potential for going forward. So I'm going to go over my top 5 takeaways with this new system and give you an idea of what it is that you can look forward to going forward with all this. I know that Games Workshop with the Warhammer community, have released a bunch of information about it, showing different data cards for the different forces and everything like that. And all that information, I think, is going to be very crucial. It plays very different. Everything about it, honestly, feels very different. It feels like a very good skirmish game, but it doesn't feel like 40K Junior. I think that the previous edition of Kill Team, and especially the Kill Team before that, was definitely 40K Junior. I mean, the first iteration of Kill Team in this latest series was essentially just regular 40K, except with smaller forces. And then the one that they just had that this is going to be replacing felt a lot like the mechanics of 40K, just again with smaller forces and a smaller kill team feel to it. This feels like a legitimately independent game in and of itself, something that's completely different. So I guess that's the first real takeaway from it, that this is a whole new system that I think is going to be changing how we interact with Kill Team. It still has the potential to allow you to build up smaller forces that you can then parlay into larger 40K teams if you so desire. It also gives the ability to collect and play with smaller forces if you don't want to do a big army. And I think that all of that is going to make all of this feel good. It's going to feel good, but you can still play Kill Team and feel like you're playing a different game. It doesn't feel like you're just playing a lesser version of 40K. It feels like you're playing a whole new game. As my friend once said back with the old edition of Kill Team, he goes, "I don't play Kill Team just like I don't play Go Fish with my Yu-Gi-Oh cards." He felt like that it just felt like you were just playing like a lesser version of the game that you built and collected these armies for. But this feels like a legitimate reason to build and collect armies differently because of how things build up, which takes me to my next point, which is going to be the big change that I think is going to affect a lot of people, is how kill teams are made. So your lists, throw everything you knew out the window. That's all gone. There are no points in this, unlike any other edition of 40K or Kill Team. You don't have points. You don't have to worry about figuring out with the guy that I have with this melting gun. I'm 2 points over on this list. No need to worry about it. The way it works out now is that you build a kill team by combining different fire teams. And fire teams are specified very specifically in the book about what you can bring with them. And a lot of them are going to be very mono unit. So essentially now what you're looking at is that fire teams can be built from essentially a box of miniatures that you buy. And depending upon how powerful they are will depend upon how many models that you will get inside of that fire team and the kill team. So, for instance, for Space Marines, regular Astartes here, your kill team will consist of one fire team. So you can only make it with one fire team. Now, that fire team can consist of only one type of unit. So you can have an incursor fire team, you can have a heavy intercessor fire team, you can have a scout fire team, you can have a tactical marine fire team. And each of them, you're going to be able to take a different number of models and a different number of different weapons for them. So for instance, if you want to take heavy intercessors, you can bring one heavy intercessor sergeant and 3 heavy intercessors. But if you want to take a scout fire team, you can take 1 scout sergeant and 9 other scouts. You can just flood the board with scouts, or you can just have these 4 big old beefy dude bros marching up the board as heavy intercessors. And it works out where the heavy intercessors are going to have a lot more wounds. They have the ability to just kind of tank things versus the scouts that aren't going to be able to do that as much. And that's where the balance comes in. And that's where they've worked in the balances. The number of models that you get to take depending upon what kind of kill team you take. But different armies are going to have different numbers of fire teams that you can take. For instance, Talons of the Emperor, you can take 2 fire teams. But those fire teams consist of, if you're going to take for instance, if you're just going to take the Custodian Guards, you get 2 models. So you only have 2 models versus, 10 models for scouts. Astra Militarum, you can take 2 fire teams. But again, that's going to be about 7 models if you're taking regular Guardsmen, 5 models if you're going to take Scions. And it feels like it will be balanced out. I've played a game with Necrons versus Guardsmen, and it felt good. It felt balanced if you're trying to work out what's happening. You never feel like you're overwhelmed or overwhelming, at least in the game that I played. I'm sure there will be instances when it will arise, but it legitimately feels like it's worked out pretty well. So on a lot of the armies, it looks like you have the ability to take 2 different fire teams, so you can have a mix. So for instance, for Tau, you can have a stealth suit fire team, and you can have a Pathfinder fire team. So you have the 2 different types of units that you can go there. You can have more of a Horde coming out with the Fire Warriors, and you can have more of an elite coming out with the whatchamacallits, with the stealth suits. So it really allows you to have that kind of diversity somewhat. So like I said, you're not going to be having a kill team that's going to consist of a Reaver Sergeant along with an Intercessor comm specialist and going along that way. That's no longer the case. Now you're going to have very specific choices that you can bring, but you don't have to worry about points. So it makes building lists easier, and it makes trying to figure out what you want to bring against people more interesting. For match play, for instance, they still brought back the roster, so you still put down a 20-man roster and figure out what you want to do. So if you're a Space Marine, you can put down, a scout, basically a scout fire team. You can put down a heavy intercessor fire team. You can put down all these different models that you want in there. And from there, once you find out against your opponent, if you're going to go against Horde, maybe those heavy intercessors are just going to be overwhelmed and not be able to handle it. So you go, maybe I'll take my scouts ones, or a tactical one where I think you end up with like 6 tactical Marines, and you can take a heavy and a weapon and a special weapon. That's another thing, is that when you're building these fire teams, this is maybe the third takeaway, you don't have specialists anymore. So you no longer have this guy that you're like, well, this guy is going to be my sniper specialist, this guy's going to be my veteran specialist, this guy's going to be my comm specialist. You no longer have that, but you do have specialized units that you can take that become almost like specialists. So, for instance, in the Astra Militarum fire team, you can take a guy with a Vox, who's your comm specialist. His ability is that if he's given an order, you can take an action to give every other Astra Militarum unit on the field that order, as opposed to only the ones within 6 or within the red marking distance. So the red pentagon distance away from your sergeant would only be the ones that were within view of him would have it. But if you have the guy with the Vox, he can spend an action to give it to everybody on the field, be able to use those actions. Those actions are actually orders end up being your ploys, your tactical ploys that you play with. You do still have some specialists in that way. Same thing with the Marines and whatever. Anybody with special weapons will be their own specialist that you can choose, and it limits those that you can take to usually to 1 per specialist that you take. So you can only take 1 comms guy. You can only take 1 guy with a melta gun. You can only take 1 guy with a flamer or whatnot. So it really narrows down what you can take in your fire team. So you can no longer have, Astra Militarum plasma spam, which is good. You don't have to worry about facing off against that. It keeps it pretty diverse. It keeps it pretty balanced and even, depending upon what you want to bring. So I think it's going to hold up the opportunity to have a lot of fun with that. The next big takeaway is going to be how the terrain on your table and line of sight are going to affect the game. So previously, you wanted to have a lot of terrain on the table because obscuring gave you the -1 to hit. It no longer does that. It no longer plays that way because a lot of the same things just don't apply anymore. So the way that terrain now works is you have different types of terrain that you can have. So you can have heavy, it provide heavy cover. It can provide light cover. It can provide vantage points. You can have these different aspects of cover that you have. So much like in 9th edition 40k, they're different than the way that a little bit different in the way that they do that. There's not quite as many, and it's not quite as confusing. Essentially, you have if it does heavy, it is obscuring. So it will provide line of sight blocking for everything on the table that you can't draw line of sight over that terrain. You also, if it provides light cover, essentially what happens is if you're in light cover, the way that the system works, there's two effects that it will have. When you activate a model, you activate them either as engaged or as concealed. And when you activate them as concealed, there's certain things they can't do. So you can't shoot, you can't fight if you're concealed. But you can still move, you can still do other actions, and you get the benefit that if you are receiving the benefit of cover, that opponents cannot target that model even if they can actually see them. So they gain the benefit of basically obscuring from light cover when you're trying to target them. So it's a way to protect some of your units as you're moving them up the table, as you're moving them to an objective. If you're trying to get them to a position to do a certain action, that's what you would do. You have them concealed, and the cover would prevent them from just being shot off the board from your opponent's deployment zone. But if you have engaged and you are do receive the benefit of cover, when you roll your defense dice, which is a mechanic now, the mechanics are completely different now when you play the game. But when you roll your defense dice, you can take one of your defense dice and just take it as a success, a regular success, not a crit success, as a regular success right off the bat. Meaning that if your opponent shoots at you and only gets one regular success, if you're in cover, you get to ignore it and you're not going to take any damage. So that's the two benefits that light cover provide for you. Line of sight is true line of sight, except for the addition of heavy terrain, providing the obscuring, and also the concealed activation token, providing you with basically obscuring terrain from when you're receiving the benefit of cover. If you're all the way out in the middle of nowhere and they've got a direct line of sight to you, it doesn't matter if you have the concealed, they can still shoot you. But if you are receiving cover, if you're behind a barricade, if you're in a terrain piece or whatever like that, you get the benefit of cover there. The other aspect of terrain is vantage points, which can counteract this concealed action. So if you are in a higher elevated position from your opponent, and you have to be at least, I think, a circle, which is I think 2 inches higher than your opponent's model, then you can treat units that have the conceal activation token as having the engage activation token. So it'll turn that light cover from obscuring for that model into just light cover, so they can still gain the benefit in their defense dice, but they do not gain the benefit of not being targetable anymore. So like I said, there's ways that you can work around it. It becomes very much more strategic actions that you have to choose. You have to decide whether you're going to try to hide them or not, and you can try to counteract that with some snipers. Now, you don't get benefit of cover from being on top of a vantage point. You don't get the cover from the actual floor of the vantage point that you're on there. So you're kind of a little bit out there unless you have it where you also have some concealment up there. But essentially you just have them sitting up there doing what they can and trying to be from a higher vantage point. So you can have like a sniper up there. So a guardsman with a sniper rifle or a scout with a sniper rifle kind of taking up there and trying to pick people off. Because different weapons, like I said, when I said like when you do the conceal action, there's certain things you can't do, like you can't shoot. There are certain weapons that have silent as one of their keywords, and those ones can actually still be shot even if you are in a conceal activation token. Speaking about different keywords with weapons, that's another big takeaway from this, is that the concept of ballistic skill and shooting and weapons have changed just intrinsically. Now, the number of shots you get and your ballistic skill or weapon skill with that weapon is determined by the weapon that you shoot. So, for instance, a regular guardsman that is shooting with a regular las rifle is going to have, I think it was 4 shots, and you hit on 4 pluses. But that same guardsman, if he has a flamer, is going to have 5 shots hitting on 2s. So there's no auto hits anymore with the flamers, but you do have 5 shots hitting on 2s, which is super good. And it has torrent, where you get to attack every unit, every model within circle marker, so 2 inches of each other. So if you have a bunch of enemy coming up and you shoot them with a flamer, you get to do all these attacks at every single model that's within that range there. Which is great, but its ballistic skill is determined by the weapon. So you have a 2-up ballistic skill when you're shooting with the flamer. You have a 4-up ballistic skill when you're shooting with the las rifle. When you're shooting with the sniper rifle, you actually, I think, have a 3-up, so it kind of like has something in the middle there, which is pretty cool because it all determines like what goes on with those different weapons and what they can do. It all balances out because the number, you can't take 1,000 sniper rifles. You can only take one. You can only take one flamer. You can only do one of these for each of your different kill teams that you do. I guess you could take 2 fire teams and you could take 2 of each at that point, but still, it still limits the amount that back in the previous edition you could take like 1,000 plasma guns and just go to town. But I think it's kind of cool the way they have that the ballistic skill is determined by the weapon to account for all the different benefits that you have. So the sniper rifle is presumed to be better balanced and you get you're able to shoot better with it. And a flamer, just you're shooting out a whole bunch of flames. It's a lot easier to hit with it than you are otherwise. So it's fun to see that work out that way, and it'll be interesting. It's going to take a little bit to get used to because you're going to have to be referring back to your book a fair amount, especially the beginning when you're trying to figure it out, because there's nothing really to refer back to in your memory of past experiences with these games to figure out what they would be. You just got to kind of learn what they're going to be going forward with it. So the next big takeaway is going to be how you score in these missions. In the previous edition of Kill Team, you had your objectives from the mission that you were trying to kill. So maybe you're trying to kill different characters, hold objectives, whatever it was. Now you have a more like 40K's version of the new 9th edition 40K version, where you have a primary mission that you score points for during the game. And you also have the secondaries that you will score, which is very similar to the ones I had in Arena previously. You form a deck of 6 cards. They will consist of either the archetype of the fire team that you have, or the ones that are specified to your faction. I wasn't able to find most of I don't see the faction ones in the compendium right here, but they do have them in the Octarius book for the 2 kill teams that come in the main Kill Team box set. And essentially you make a deck of 6 cards. You then you shuffle it up, draw 2, choose one of those, discard the other. Do it again, draw 2, choose 1, discard 1, choose 2, draw 2, choose 1, discard 1. So you don't get to just choose straight up which ones you want, but you get to create a deck that you will get options for. So if you have, say, 2 that you really think that your kill team is going to do really good at getting based upon the mission, based upon your opponent, you still have there's the potential that you put them in that deck and you draw them both at the same time, and one of them is going to have to be discarded, one of them is going to be chosen. So you don't reveal those until you're ready to try to score them, because most of them are scored at the end of a turning point, which is your turn. At the end of each turning point, you will score based upon achieving different things. So having a certain number of bodies within a certain distance of the center of the board, getting something into, at the end of the game, you might have it where you have to get it into your opponent's deployment zone. Whatever it is, the card itself will tell you when you have to reveal it, because some of them you have to reveal, you don't reveal until after you've achieved it, and other ones you reveal when certain actions occur, and other ones you have to reveal before you can achieve them. So it would be at the beginning of the turning point, you would say, I'm going to try to put a whole bunch of bodies in the center. So it gives your opponent the opportunity to go, oh, well, then I'm just going to rush up and try to jump in the middle to keep you from getting those points. You'll score 1 point for each of those cards, and then if you do the same thing again in a later turning point, you can score another point. So trying to keep it and position yourself so that you're better able to score the point is good, but it also makes it harder for you to try to max out on that card, getting that additional point later on if you do it too late. Because if you just show it at the 4th turn, you can only ever score the 1 point for that card. The primary missions are similar kind of thing, where you have to hold objectives, you have to do different things. But the big change is now these secondaries, the spec ups, I think they're called, and essentially they allow you to just choose what you're going to do with the mission, which is fun. I like that. That's one of my favorite things about the current 9th edition of 40K is the mixture between the primary and the secondary. It allows you to just have an idea of what you want to do going forward, and then as you start to get to know the different cards and what you can do, you can start to have an idea of what you're looking to do with your different kill teams, because they're all specified what kind of archetype they are and what they can choose to do. So that's a big change, and I think it's a good change. It'll be fun. I loved playing Arena, and much like Arena, you only have 4 turns to do everything in it as well. There's no random game length. It's all 4 turns now, or 4 turning points, whatever you want to call it. The way they work there, but yeah, it's fun. It's fast. It will be fast. The first game that we played was a little bit slower because we were referring to the book every single time, just because like I said, it doesn't really build off of any of your previous knowledge about 40k or Kill Team. It really is something completely different and new that I think is fun and interesting, but it will take a while to get used to it just because it's something very different. And if you play a whole lot of different skirmish games or a whole bunch of different war games, maybe it won't take you as long because you're used to that. But someone like me who essentially only plays 40k or Kill Team, it's going to take a little bit to get used to because it's a big change. So, but I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be interesting, and I'm looking forward to building into that. All right, so those are my biggest takeaways from the new edition of Kill Team, Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see what they do going forward because there's a lot of units that were introduced in Elites that have not been introduced in this edition so far. So I imagine that they're probably going to come out with expansions for this and do the same kind of thing that they've done previously. I know people don't like it, but I think it's fun to see expansions, see it checked out and build from there because this gives us an opportunity to see what goes on. So it'll be fun to see how it all plays out. I'm a big fan. The biggest change to me, I think, is definitely going to be in team building, just because it's so very different to what we had previously. I know all the mechanics are different, but that just is innately a different kind of mindset that you have to get yourself into to try to figure it out here. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think it's going to be interesting to get into the game and see how it goes. And just have a good time with it. I think it's going to be fun. I think it seems like it's very interesting. Feels very dynamic. It feels very tactical, which is everything that I think a skirmish game should do. And it feels like it eventually will be quick once you get the rules down, which is going to be fun. That's another thing that I think these kind of skirmish games were designed to do. So so I think now that this has gone up, I think it's on pre-order now. You can check it out and go buy it, or if you're watching this much later on, then just it's for sale. So GW's already said that they're going to make it basically made to order, so anybody that orders will get a copy of it, which is pretty good. So go ahead, check it out. I really am excited for this new edition. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm interested to see what kind of different fire teams that people are going to be going with, and see what the meta develops into, see what people try. And I've already got ideas for teams that I want to build, which I think is going to be fun. And each of the different kill teams, it seems like you can build a fire team from one box. Which is great, and I think that's a good way to allow new players to get into this system. It allows them to just buy a box and be like, okay, I can build a fire team from this. There's certain armies that you're going to need multiple fire teams to build out a kill team. You might need 2 boxes at most, really, at this point that I've seen. The most you'd need is 2 boxes to build a kill team. So it's not bad. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see how they all play out and how people keep building it. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. Let me know down below what you think about this new edition so far and what you think about the different takeaways that I've talked about here. I'm excited for them, but let me know what you think. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.